Imagine this. It's 1 million years ago. The African savanna stretches endlessly in every direction. Dry grass, acacia trees, the distant silhouette of mountains glowing amber under a dying sun. And then, lightning strikes. A tree explodes into flame. The fire spreads fast, devouring grass, chasing every living creature away in a blind panic. Elephants stampede, birds scatter. Every animal on the plain, every instinct honed by millions of years of evolution, screams one thing: run. But one creature doesn't run. A small group of upright hominins stands at the edge of the blaze, their eyes wide, their nostrils flaring. They watch the fire with something no other animal has ever pointed at a flame before: curiosity. One of them, a male, lean and dark-eyed, takes a step closer instead of away. The heat presses against his face. Smoke curls into his lungs. Every other creature on Earth would choke, retreat, die. But he breathes it in. And something in his blood, something written in the deepest architecture of his DNA, something no Neanderthal, no chimpanzee, no other primate on Earth carries, quietly, invisibly, saves him. He doesn't know it. He can't know it. But in this moment, that tiny mutation, a single change in a single gene, is about to hand his species the keys to the entire planet. This is the story of the secret genetic mutation that allowed our ancestors to master deadly fire. To understand how extraordinary this mutation is, you first have to understand how terrifying fire actually is, not just physically, but biologically. Fire is not simply hot, it is chemically dangerous. When organic material burns, wood, grass, bone, meat, it releases a cocktail of toxic compounds called polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, or PAHs. These are the same chemicals found in cigarette smoke, car exhaust, charred meat, and industrial pollution. At high concentrations, they don't just irritate your lungs, they damage your DNA. They cause cancer. They suppress your immune system. They can cross the placental barrier in pregnant women and kill unborn children. For almost every species on Earth, smoke is a death sentence at close range. And yet here's the strange thing. By at least 1 million years ago, and possibly as far back as 2 million years, our ancestors were not just tolerating fire, they were living around it, sleeping next to it, cooking with it, clustering around it night after night, breathing in those toxic plumes, generation after generation. How did they survive? For a long time, scientists assumed it was simply adaptation, that over thousands of generations, the ones who couldn't handle smoke just died younger, reproduced less, and the tough ones survived. Natural selection doing what it always does. But when researchers at Penn State University decided to look more carefully at the genetics of this question, when they compared the DNA of modern humans to that of Neanderthals and Denisovans, our closest extinct relatives, they found something they never expected. It wasn't gradual. It wasn't slow. It wasn't 100 small changes across thousands of genes. It was one mutation. One. Deep inside every cell of your body, you carry a protein called the Aryl Hydrocarbon Receptor, or AHR for short. Think of it as your body's chemical alarm system. When toxic compounds from smoke or pollution enter your bloodstream, the AHR is the receptor that detects them. It's the sensor that tells your liver, something dangerous is here. Start processing it, break it down, get it out. Every primate has this receptor. Chimpanzees have it, gorillas have it, Neanderthals had it. But modern humans, Homo sapiens, carry a unique version, a mutated version, a version found nowhere else in the primate family tree. And the difference it makes is almost unbelievable. When Penn State researcher Gary Perdue and his team compared the human AHR to the Neanderthal AHR, they expected maybe a modest difference, maybe 10 times more sensitive, maybe 20. What they found was 100 to 1,000 times more sensitive. Let that sink in. The same quantity of smoke toxins that would send a Neanderthal's system into overdrive, flooding their body with inflammatory responses, damaging their lungs, suppressing their immune function, barely registered in a modern human system. Our receptor processed the toxins differently, more efficiently, more safely. But here's the brilliance of it. And this is the part that separates this mutation from just being tough. It wasn't about eliminating the response to toxins entirely. As Purdue explains it, if you're breathing in smoke, you want to metabolize these hydrophobic compounds and get rid of them. However, you don't want to metabolize them so rapidly that it overloads your system and causes overt cellular toxicity. In other words, the mutation hit a sweet spot. It made humans resistant enough to survive extended smoke exposure, but not so aggressive in processing the toxins that the body overloaded itself and caused new damage. It was a biological Goldilocks zone, and it existed only in us. What this actually changed. Now here's where the story gets truly extraordinary. Because you might be thinking, okay, so we could breathe smoke better. What's the big deal? Lots of animals have weird adaptations. But this was not a small deal. This was perhaps the single most consequential biological advantage in the history of our species. Think about what fire gave our ancestors once they could actually live with it. First, food. Cooking is not just about taste. Cooking fundamentally transforms the caloric value of food. Cooked meat is easier to digest. Cooked tubers and roots, which are almost inedible raw, become rich sources of carbohydrate energy. Harvard evolutionary biologist Richard Wrangham has argued for decades that the moment our ancestors started cooking regularly, something dramatic happened. Their digestive systems shrank because the gut no longer had to work as hard. And all of that freed up energy went somewhere. It went to the brain. Brain tissue requires 22 times more energy per gram than an equivalent amount of muscle. The only way to grow an expensive brain is to have a caloric surplus. Fire, and specifically cooked food, provided exactly that. Second, safety. Fire kept predators away. Lions, leopards, hyenas, the massive prehistoric predators of the Pleistocene, none of them would approach a flame. A group of hominins sleeping around a fire at night was effectively invisible to the danger of the dark. They could rest on the ground instead of clinging to trees. They could sleep longer, more deeply, more safely. Better sleep meant faster recovery. Faster recovery meant more energy for everything else, including thinking. Third, social bonding. There is something about a fire at night that pulls people together. Anthropologists believe that the campfire was one of the earliest sites of what we might recognize as culture. Storytelling, shared meals, coordinated planning, the kind of complex social interaction that requires language and theory of mind. Fire didn't just feed our bodies, it fed our communities. And all of this, every single one of these advantages, was available to us in ways that our competitors could not fully access. Because while Neanderthals also used fire, and they did, the evidence is clear, their bodies paid a price that ours did not. Neanderthals were not primitive. Let's be clear about that. They were intelligent. They made tools. They buried their dead. They decorated their bodies. Recent research shows they were using fire consistently from around 400,000 years ago. They survived ice ages. They were, by almost any measure, remarkably successful creatures. But they had the ancestral version of the AHR, the version shared by chimpanzees, gorillas, and every other non-human primate. And that means every time they sat around a fire, every time they cooked meat, every time they huddled in a smoke-filled cave for warmth through a glacial winter, their bodies were being slowly poisoned in ways ours were not. The researchers hypothesize what that meant in practice. Chronic smoke exposure in Neanderthal populations likely increased rates of respiratory infections. Their children, especially pre-adolescents, would have been particularly vulnerable to respiratory viruses. Their women, when pregnant, faced higher risks of low birth weight infants and infant mortality. Think about the compounding math of that over generations. Even a small reduction in infant survival rates, even a modest increase in winter respiratory illness, even a slight decrease in female reproductive success due to smoke-induced complications. Multiplied across thousands of years, across an entire species. While modern humans, with their mutated AHR, their smoke-tolerant systems, sat around those same fires, breathed the same air, and thrived. It wasn't the only reason Neanderthals disappeared, but it may have been one of the quiet, invisible forces slowly tipping the scales. There is one last twist to this story that is equal parts brilliant and darkly funny. The same mutation that made us resilient to smoke, the same genetic gift that allowed our ancestors to master fire, cook food, grow bigger brains, build civilization, also made us tolerant enough to pick up one of the deadliest habits in human history. Cigarette smoking. Gary Purdue noted this himself. Our AHR mutation gave us just enough resistance to smoke toxins that when tobacco arrived, with its far more concentrated, repeated, intimate delivery of those exact same polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, we could tolerate it. Not thrive under it, not be immune to it, but tolerate it. Enough to get addicted, enough to keep coming back, enough to spend centuries slowly dying from a habit our biology was just barely adapted to survive. Our tolerance, Purdue said, has allowed us to pick up bad habits. The very gene that saved us from extinction also made us vulnerable to one of the leading causes of preventable death in the modern world. Evolution, it turns out, doesn't optimize for the future. It optimizes for right now, for survival in the moment, for the immediate advantage that keeps this generation alive long enough to reproduce. And in the moment, 1 million years ago on the African savanna, standing at the edge of a burning world, that mutation was the most powerful gift any species had ever been given. We think of human history as being built by great leaders, great inventions, great wars, great ideas. But sometimes, buried quietly in the coils of our DNA, invisible to any eye and unknown to those who carried it, is something even more profound. A single mutation, in a single receptor, in a single gene, that one day, hundreds of thousands of years ago, allowed one ancestor to breathe in the smoke of a burning world and stay. And from that moment, we never stopped building fires. If you found this story fascinating, share it, because the most remarkable chapters of human history are often written not in conquest or catastrophe, but in the silent language of biology.